today we've got, like I said, Alan Merritt is our guest host. So what we're going to do, just to give anybody that doesn't know Alan, going to give you a little bit of a background. This is an interview we did with James Harvey when he was with Vox Populi. So we play this now, and then people will have an idea.
For the children today, and as a abuse survivor yourself from, what school was it again?
It was Beechholm in Banstead, Surrey.
That's it, Beechholm
Children's Home.
You're a Beechholm survivor.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's so important that we need to stand here for the children?
For the simple reason is our politicians won't do it. Our politicians will have no inquiries. Our MPs won't stand up in chamber and turn around and say, demand a public inquiry into the historic child abuse that's gone on. We colonialise the world and child abuse, right? All four corners of the world, the Asians, the Americas and everywhere. Nothing's ever been done about our trafficking, our grooming. Beechholm was one of the largest children's homes in this country. I'm going to be talking about it on the stage about Beechholm and what happened to quite a lot of children. At one stage, had 900 children in it. That is huge, and that's off the scale.
They would put you in baths with bleach. They would use carbolic soap on you. They put carbolic soap in my mouth and said, we'll wash your mouth out with soap.
So, Alan, obviously you have, you're, I'd say, across the whole of the UK, you're known for your work and your campaigning against, we can say as a whole, I suppose, as a broad subject, child abuse.
Yeah.
You've got your own experiences, but that's not your limit of where, your focus is. Your focus is all across all angles. I know at the moment you're talking about the grooming gang inquiry, what's needed. But also you do a lot of public speaking.
Yeah.
You've done a lot of public work, like you see on there, spoke on stage. I believe you've got something coming up. I'll let you explain all that though. But for the people who have watched that now and may not know, what is it that motivates you? What is it why do you do what you do?
But the simple reason is the politicians don't take any notice of what's happened to our children. I mean, there is so much wrong in this country. We've got 2.2 million pensioners. They're in poverty. We've got some of our vets that are sleeping on the streets. We spend a lot of money on these hotels, right? But there's no MP. Now, if I said to you, I've spoken in the House of Lords, I've spoken in the Home Office, I've been in Parliament, and I've written to nearly every single politician, whether it be Conservatives or Labour, and one of them will take any notice of you, and they say, well, you're not in my constituency, so and so. They just pass the buck.
Yeah.
And one of them will have the mettle to stand up in Parliament and turn around and say, I demand a public inquiry, and our children must come first in every case. And it's so much as that, it's not about me so much, it's about my family as well, because my two sisters and my other brother, all four of us were abused in the same children's home. So it's historically, to me, very important that one of the biggest children's homes in this country, where it had its own regiment, where children went from the poor workhouses in London to Beechholm, and from there they went into the Second World War at 17. So not only was they abused, not only were they tortured in similar conditions to what we were and my family were, these guys, 83 of them never came back from the Second World War. What kind of life did they have? Where are they spoken about? Where's their memorial?
Yeah. Well, if there's anything anyone can say about you, it's your commitment to the cause. You travel the whole of the UK, literally the width and breadth of the UK, to different events, to help spread that message. So your commitment is unwavering, to this cause, and it shows how important this is. And and you can speak of this from a first-hand experience point of view. Yeah. And we're talking a long time ago. Obviously, this was a view. It's, if not worse today. Back then things were able to be ignored, brushed under the carpet. Now, when things are less able to be brushed under the carpet and ignored, there's more ignoring of it, on a massive scale. So there's no excuse now, basically, is what I'm saying.
I actually think you've got a big problem in this country anyway. I think in Wales, abuse has been very rife for a long, long time, and it's still going on. In actual fact, I think in Anglesey, there's a children's home where they're still cling filming children to this very, very day. Although it might be privatised, the forms of abuse and the tortures and the torment and the psychological damage, the physical, psychological, mental damage they do to children. You know, I have a saying: once you take a child's innocence, it's gone forever.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely right. You know, these things can't be changed. There's not really any form of cure. You know, apart from what you kind of channel your energy into awareness and raising awareness on it, which is great. Some people don't have that confidence, don't have that. Not motivation, but they're not able to do it. So you're working on the behalf of how many thousands of people?
Yeah.
How many hundreds of thousands of people?
It's historically when we talk about, there's so much, the grooming, the trafficking, the abuse of our children, the torture, the torment. I actually said we colonialised the world on child abuse. When we had no more use for our children, you can only use your children for so long before they're burnt out, right? And in actual fact, children are the new drug. You can use a drug once, you can use a child 100 times.
Yeah.
And as horrible and as horrific as that sounds, for me to turn around and say that, it's true.
Yeah. Well, it's, it always seems to be, we can talk, it's not just top level elitist sort of, you see the Jeffrey Epstein, allegedly Prince Andrew, and whatever list, the Clintons, that list of Epstein Island, that's the elitists. And it's, the people who've got so much money, they need some, they can buy anything they want. So their desire to have something that is forbidden, and it normally leads to children. That's that aspect of it. But you've also got the grooming gangs, which is at the forefront of, I think, a lot of people, especially in the movement, on this side of politics anyway. I wouldn't even say the child protection movement. This side of politics, there's a massive focus on the grooming gang scandal and the inquiry that's needed, because just before they closed Parliament, can't remember her name, just flown up my head, but the last thing she did before they closed Parliament was to announce there's not going to be an inquiry. Yeah. So it's at the forefront. So, people need to understand, I think it's our job as media, as activists, public speakers, it's our job to tell people and explain to people what the risks and the concerns are. Because with the grooming gang scandal, it was, again, from care homes, predominantly, or not predominantly, a lot of the time, it was from care homes, children who were underprivileged, going through rough times and things like that. So it's not a simple fix, is it?
There's so much involved in it, Dan. I mean, at the end of the day, you don't know how. I've got some kind of a unique insight into it in the respect that I cabbed in London as well. So I know Dolphin Square, right? I know the Elms Guest House, where Cyril Smith went. We can go back historically to Cyril Smith. You can go back to Lord Still, 81, and went into the House of Lords. 40 years earlier, he said he knew all about Cyril Smith, but then say nothing in public life. So to me, that is all wrong. How can a man take an enhanced pension up until he's 81 years of age and then turn around and say he knew all about Cyril Smith? He's complicit. And a lot of politicians are the same, And the insight that I had with the Dolphin Square, there's 3 children's bodies found in the Thames, right, off of Dolphin Square. They were taking children from Beach Home to the Elms Guest House. They were using children from all different children's homes. Jimmy Savile played a part of it as well. And then we can go back to our Premier at this very, very moment. When he was head of the CPS, there were 66,000 cases, right, were stopped for incompetence, for bad, costing the taxpayer something like £250 million. In them days, that was a lot of money. But they don't talk about that today. They don't talk about his incompetence then, and for his blatant line in the Oval Office about free speech.
And you can't say, there's no way on earth this didn't cross his desk. There's a lot of people saying, he didn't actually have any involvement with it, which is fair enough, and he might not have had any involvement with it. But as a head of the CPS, high profile someone like Jimmy Savile, with all that access that he has, it would have crossed his desk.
Yes.
And look at the connections that Savile had. Prince, or the now king, he used to write the speeches for, Jimmy Savile used to write the speeches for him.
But this is so big, when we talk about this, we can talk about the politics and everything of it. We can say, you can talk about royalty and so on and so forth. You can talk about Prince Andrew. You can go back to Lord Mountbatten. Why did Lord Mountbatten get blown up on a boat? Because he was abusing children in the children's homes in Northern Ireland, right? That's why. Because they didn't like abuse, so they ended up, he ended up like the way he was. Prince Andrew doesn't have to come out the gates of Buckingham Palace. He can come out of any of the gates and doors in the walls of you go down Grosvenor Place. There's doors in that brick wall, and he used to go across from Buckingham Palace through them doors as if he was a workman or something like that, or a gardener or a groundsman or whatever the case might be, over to Belgravia where Coo Stock was. He was seeing Coo Stock. Now, I know Mel doesn't speak for herself, and she can't because she's under license, but I can speak for her. I can say things like, and I know Mel went to the parties in Belgravia with Coo Stock. I know for a cab driver, I was driving the likes of Coo Stock about. She was a photographer. She had a studio in Knightsbridge. She had a flat in Belgravia, and that's where a lot of the parties were, and that's where Prince Andrew went.
Well, and that's it. Why do you think that it is? What is the reason why it's being so? Elon Musk came out and started, screaming about it. He put a massive spotlight on the grooming gang scandal and the cover up. He called, is it Angela Rayner, a rape apologist? So a lot of these people were name shamed, but then you had 2 or 3 days of everybody kicking off, and then it disappears. Like, that's deliberate. The media are the people who keep the stories alive and keep the stories going, and they choose to drop it. Why do you think the BBC are not focusing on this sort of thing? Because this is huge. If it was to be uncovered, it'd be the biggest story uncovered on Earth ever. Why wouldn't the BBC be looking into it?
Because it's full of pedophiles. I mean, you had your Stuart Halls, you had your Jimmy Saviles, you had your
Gary Glitters,
Rolf Harris's. There is so many, and there's a lot. And to be truthful, Jill Dando was about to name the whole ring of paedophilia in the BBC.
If it wasn't for that pesky far-right Britain First guy, eh? Because that was the story, wouldn't it?
Absolutely right.
That was the story. So, it does. But so the BBC, obviously, recently, they've got now the statue of Eric Gill. You may have seen that it's been restored, and it's got a big case around it.
Yeah, I see that.
And that is because it kept on getting attacked. If it wasn't being shot by people with paintballs, it was people climbing up with a hammer and literally smashing it to pieces. Why are people doing that?
But if like I say, there's so
why
much. Why
wouldn't they just take it down? Why when the BBC were on such a big push to take down any statues of any people they would consider a slave trader, why would they not rush to take down a statue of a paedophile they got hanging on their building?
Because they've got things to hide. There's skeletons in their cupboards, and exactly. And do you know what? The BBC are complicit. I made the documentary when I was in Beecham, right? You can, like I said to you, there's so much out there. You have to look. If you go on YouTube and you put Gailey's Dead, a series that was done by the BBC, there's 6 series on YouTube called Gailey's Dead. Now, they took my part out of it, which I was in the first part of it, right? Because my parents at the time, my mother said, I didn't want my son being shown in it. Now, I was in there, and there was a memorial on the wall outside the orchard. It was like a school where Nancy Davids, the woman that was looking after Gal, is the story is about. It's quite interesting. People, if you look, you can find anything you want to know. Yeah. There's a thing called the Reigns list. It names all the politicians that are involved in child abuse. The reason why politicians don't get involved and don't do anything is they're complicit. There's 650 MPs in the corridors of Westminster, and they know what goes on. It's like the police officers know what goes on in the locker rooms. They all know. It's the judiciary, the judges. They all know. Yeah. They're all bought and paid for. Yeah.
And all you needed to do really was look at the Labour Party. We've got, I can have a little look.
66 at the moment, isn't it?
What's that now? Paedophiles?
66 are under investigation at the moment. Oh. There's 66 Labour Party either candidates, councillors, or whatever they make it. And this is the problem. They go out in their constituencies, and a lot of the paedophilia that's going on with the grooming gangs, the Labour Party are involved.